For the last talk of this session, we are really glad to receive Rogério Monteiro. Rogério is a historian of science who has both actuated in France and also studied relations between Brazil and France. But that's not what he's going to talk about today. He's a professor at the School of Arts, Humanities and Sciences of the University of São Paulo, but he's also occupying a position on the Dean of Belonging and Inclusion, Pró-Reitoria de Inclusão e Pertencimento, in the Diretoria de Mulheres, Relações Étnicos, Raciais e Diversidades. So he has an important position related to the university politics related to subjects we are discussing. So his talk has the title, Thinking Categories, Shaping Numbers, for a History of Gender and Race Scholar Categories at USP. Thank you very much, Rogério.
Well, thank you very much, João, for the organization of the seminar. I'm very happy to be here. Well, we find ourselves in the seminars abroad, University of São Paulo, and now we have a very good occasion to talk about our work. So thank you very much for this occasion, this moment. The first idea of my talk was, as I said to João 2 months ago, I suppose, was to discuss how the Supreme Court in Brazil was dealing with the category of race. But I gave up of this idea, and I tried to work on the same problem, but from the perspective of the history of the university, and trying to connect with my duties at the Diretoria de Mulheres, Relações Étnico-Raciais e Diversidades, and with this I'm trying to mix my side of historian, my side of mathematician of 20 years ago, 30 years ago, and my position as director for diversity at the university. Let's try with. I don't know if you work, but let's try. So I begin with a discussion about visibilities. I would like to start with this beautiful photography at the history of the university. Well, I will read my presentation because I have to control the time and all this. So I start with 11. Please. So let me start here. The photographer did not wait until everyone was lining up and paying attention. He pressed the shutter, capturing the Brazil first female physicist in the university, Yolande Monteiro, distracted and lost, in thoughts. She's in the middle of this photography. Almost everyone in the center of the photograph seems to have been caught off guard. Abraão de Moraes to the right of Monteiro, and Giuseppe Occalini, the only one without a jacket, in the right and the left side of the photography, and while José, the caretaker, in almost a blur in the background of the image, his hair almost lost in the middle of the photograph. Maria, the only black woman in the photo, unlike her husband José, leans her body to the side and presents herself to the photographer almost full-length at the left of the photograph, forming a second block on the left with Roberto Xavier de Oliveira. At the opposite end, Gleb Vatagen, at the time a professor in the physics department of University of São Paulo. In fact, he was the professor, the most important personage at the period in the laboratory, forms a trio with the physicist Mario Chamber, very famous Mario Chamber, and the laboratory technician Francisco Guidolin. Vatag seems to push the two slides into the foreground of the image, like Maria and Xavier de Oliveira. Chamber planned, he make a kind of gesture to the photographer in opposite of Yolande Monteiro, who is distracted in the photograph. Well, in the photograph, laboratory technicians, young researchers, and building caretakers blend indistinctly in their various places, shuffling any strategy of analyze this moment in terms of gender or ethnic inequalities. But the sources that that survive to this day tell us otherwise another picture. In the administrative documentation preserved in the archives, we find the full name of Francisco Bentivolio Guidolin, the laboratory assistant who helped the team to set up the experiment, but we are left with only the first name and this image of the caretakers of the physics section. In the university's official statistics, in its early decades, the presence of women was not considered as a category to be monitored. In the presence of women was not considered nor was that the brown and black people, much less of the technicians. So those categories didn't exist for university at this period. The yearbooks and the bulletin of the teaching units seems concerned without any distinction of students and graduated students, and the names of teachers distribute in categories, only that. Even when the EACH-USP statistical yearbook were introduced in 1987 to, I quote, serve a tool for the planning of its activities and provide input for the decision-making process, we don't see this kind of subcategories of the population. Even in areas with a high proportion of women, there are very few at the highest level of the career I changed the I'm sorry. Here. The distribution of staff, teaching and administrative by gender, male and female, only appears in 1995, and later in 2019, sex was replaced by gender at the top of the tables, although gender in the statistical framework of the yearbook does not seem to accommodate the plasticity of or performative dimension of gender. In fact, it's male and female, and that's it. The category race and color introduced in university reports from 2021 onwards, in the midst of the debates of quota in the vestibular, it's not different. The DUI maintains the tension between a social constructed, when we talk about race, we are supposing identity, an identity perspective of these personages, and by the other side, we have the phenotypic trait, color and kind of hair, etc., etc., etc. So when we see these modes, this way of classification in the years books of the university, we see yet this kind of tension between identity and the problems with the category of race. Thus, if we follow the official documentation, it's difficult to assess how rare the presence of Yolande Monteiro and Dona Maria is in the corridor of the Faculty of Philosophy. Monteiro appears in other photographs among professors and students, and her name appears in a report attributed to Vatag, her professor, alongside colleagues who deserve recognition for their intellectual production and awards. but to know the exact place of Monto achievement, to measure the evaluation of female presence at the University of São Paulo, it will be necessary to submit the long list of teachers and the students to a kind of categorization of names. I mean, female or male, female or male. But this stratagem will not work in the case of laboratory assistants or other employees like Dona Maria, because we don't have any trace of race and or phenotypic details of this group. I'm sorry. Here. The photography, therefore, presents an iconography record that was unusual, I mean, the first photograph at the time, because it represents a reversal of the university hierarchy typical of this moment. As we see in the 1937 graduation photograph, women was separate from men, professors always in the front of the photography, and there are no black people, and the black and white photograph does not allow us to know if there are, I don't know, mixed or brown people in the photography. You don't have trace of this kind of thing. So a social history of the black presence at the University of São Paulo will have to do without data such as this. We don't have documentation. There is no way of knowing how many black women there were in the university, nor do we know whether Dona Maria perceived and understood herself as a black woman. We don't know. No trace. Okay? In this context, it's appropriate to refer to John Scott and her paper, The Invisibility of, in fact, the name in English, The Evidence of Experience. Scott argues that the observation of a phenomenon should not imply certainly of its predetermined existence. In fact, we have attention here, because if you see the past from our perspective, we are trying all the time to see these categories using there. But for people at that moment, we don't know if these categories are in dispute, or even Dona Maria works with these terms, or if she's racialized or something like that. Okay? So Scott argues that the observation of a phenomenon should not imply certainty of its predetermined existence, but rather the need to reject. There is a necessity to reject essentialism from this her perspective. The imposition of universal categories such as worker, woman, black people, she says, peasant, that has masked the operational difference in the organization of social life. It's because exactly of this kind of universal category that we don't know exactly this kind of dynamics. We don't have good tools to analyze the historical process. Scott warns that fixed categories can solidify ideological process, naturalize the subject rather than analyze it, making the process less apparent. Therefore, rather than simply celebrate the presence of a black woman, because when we see the photography, yes, we have a black woman in the history of the university, it's crucial to question what made her presence possible and how Dona Maria was conceived at that time, contrasting with contemporary analytical categories, okay? Well, this picture is quite different 19 years after the university's founding. Among undergraduate, graduate, and postdoctoral students, as well as administrative staff, women make up almost half of the population. The breakdown of data into female and male in the late 19th would indicate a greater gender balance in the university population, the result of women entering the labor market and the university banks from the 1960s onwards. In fact, this appearance of greater balance needs to be reinterpreted in light of the distribution of women, men, black people, and Asian people across the long academic hierarchy at the university. At the beginning of their teaching careers, 42% are female, but this percentage gradually decreases as we move toward the position of full professor, as we see here. In order for the data to become legible, commensurable, and comparable, statistical work collates different differences under the same figure, which needs to be re-examined if you want to go beyond the hegemonic representation that now shows men, women. Unlike the case of Dona Maria Yolande Monteiro, we can now locate personal trajectories more precisely within the horizon of possibles of the periods. What I'm trying to say that, in fact, the reorganization of the data at the last decades pose new questions from the historical perspective and try and make possible reanalyze a new analysis of the gender and race perspective. In this sense, instead of assuming certain statistical categories such woman, black, disabled, bisexual, because nowadays, working with director for diversity, I'm trying just select two cases, small cases in my database. In fact, we are discussing now diversity in a very broad and large perspective. So we have all the kind of orientation, sexual orientations. We have all the diversity, disabilitation of bodies, and this kind of debates at the university nowadays. So it's necessary to revisit the project of unstable interrelationships between words and things, trying to discuss with you the very famous work of Foucault, As Palavras e as Coisas, né? Les mots et les choses. Or rather, to produce a historicity of the categories that review a discourse, and from there to think about a history of equity and diversity in the academic environment. In some sense, well, it was very good to hear the colleagues talking about all the process to control the categories from the perspective of genetic and genomic debates. But in fact, nowadays, in the social life, they are out of control of the scientists. In fact, we are now using all these kind of categories as modes of talking about diversity at the university and talking about more equities in all the, all the levels of the university. The debate on the place of mixed race people in Brazilian statistics or black women within Brazilian feminists in the 1980s places statistics as technical political instruments that need to be properly appropriated. See, in this sense, what I'm trying to say that in certain moment of the history of Brazil, for example, in the 80s, many people from the black movement in Brazil, for example, Sueli Carneiro, will accept, okay, we have race. We have this dimension of race in Brazil, and they are sometimes connected with gender. And so we will work from this perspective, accepting this, what kind of debate, social debate or political debate we will, how can I say, try to explore and discuss some inequalities of the Brazilian society, okay? So okay, we know that from the genetic perspective, it's a movable concept, but from the perspective of the racism in Brazil, it's a very solid place to talk about this kind of inequalities. So she says, the Brazilian feminist movement in turn produced numerous studies and case studies on women during those 10 years, albeit on a smaller scale than the official census. However, the variable of color was not systematically incorporated into the theoretical prediction in such a way that black women could benefit greatly from the studies in question. This disregard for race, whether in official statistics or in feminist theoretical work, indicates that the levels of contradiction that exist between black and white in Brazilian society in general, and between white and black women in particular. She will work very hardly on the work statistics of women in the 80s in order to demonstrate that black woman was the last category in the hierarchy of the work world in that period. In order to, it's very interesting the position of Sueli Carneiro, because by one side she's very feminist and she think globally the agenda of feminists, but the other side he tries all the time to pose the question and the position of black women and the position of black people in the university, etc., etc. So it's a kind of a positional strategy in the field at the moment. Thus, therefore, once reclassified in positions, opaque figures take on certain gestural and performative dimensions. Certain bodies have a better chance than others of reaching certain positions. Black women can no longer be confused with black men or white women. The question will then not be limited to whether there are other Marias or Yolanda, but rather to the conditions for the permanence and the advancement of certain women and certain men in certain positions. When we try to, we accept the categories in the Brazilian institutions. We are dealing with these categories in the... So what we produce from this is this kind of hierarchy. For example, when you see the last position of the universities, we have the titular professors. The majority is white professors, okay? And by the opposite, we almost don't have black men. And we have also hierarchy between connecting woman, gender, because white woman it's better than black man, and with this kind of statistical data, which was not planned to work with this kind of analysis. Nowadays, we are trying. We can do a kind of intersectional analysis of the process, and we can suggest that gender is connected sometimes with race, and we have another, I think, the pressure nowadays is what kind of questions we will pose for our population at the university in order to see another inequalities, or what kind of policies we are developed from this perspective. In this, so although 55% of the population of the state of São Paulo self-identify as white, 41 as brown and black, and 1 0.2 as an Asian among the professors with doctorates at the university. 89% is white. So it's the most important. And when I say that, by one side, is historian saying that, by the other side is the director of diversity saying, oh, listen, so it's politics and historian all at the same time, trying to equilibrate in my head all the problems that you pose before me and the problems of equity at the university. In fact, this is not a problem or a question poses only for the University of São Paulo. Now it's my time to trying to connect with the broad picture. A GEMA study, GEMA is a very good laboratory who works with this kind of problems. On postgraduate professors in Brazil indicates that 60% of professors in Brazil are white men, 29 are white women, 40.9 are black, brown, and indigenous, and 2.5 are black women and indigenous women. So we are talking about the big picture at the university in Brazil. It's not so distant from the case of the University of São Paulo. This hierarchy of gender and race with black women at the bottom is not a phenomenon exclusive of USP. A temporal analysis of the undergraduate student population reveals that in the 20s, 2000, the years 2000, it's the beginning of my statistics there, more than 50% of USP students did not identify themselves from the perspective of raciality. We see here that all this, what's called pink, yes, all this we are not classifying themselves as a position. And when we introduce this category for the population, because all the dynamics of quotas normally principle here, we see that the majority of the population will present themselves, or they will be racialized from this perspective. I mean, with the growing ethnical racial agenda and quota policies, this no-identification rate has decreased significantly, while the presence of black students has increased from 80% in 2005 to 26% in 2022. This change is not only due to quotas, but also to process of personal recognition and ethnic racial mobility within the university. In fact, we have some studies in the national vestibular, I mean the ENEM, who a very beautiful paper that they shows that some students who present as black people at some point, some years after, they change off his category for white people. So we have this kind of mobility of the self-presentation in the statistics in ENEM, for example, in the vestibular. This reinforced that the idea that category black is also produced throughout the historical and personal process. I mean, when you put the question for the population, what kind of, how do you present yourself as black or brown or indigenous, this kind of proposition pose it's almost a kind of obligation to present, who I am in this debate. So this kind of change that we are seeing here are connected with this kind of problem. So according to Ian Hawking, new compartments are new slots were created in which to fit and enumerate people. Even national and provincial censuses amazingly show that the categories into which people fall change every 10 years. Social change creates new categories of people, but the counting is not mere report of the development. It's a laboratory often philanthropically creates new ways for people to be. In the sense that I know that we are talking about, with that, I will try to finish my talk. I know that we are talking with this kind of stability of gender, of racial or genomic, when we are talking, when you use the genomic, for example, the example of the genealogy and present here. Oh, where my family from, using genomic data is normally an idea of try to reconstruct his identity as person, as a group, okay? Using a scientific tool, sure, sold by a company who are just using the genetic strategies to sell a product for everybody, okay? But this kind of strategies, for me, it's very representative of this kind of debate, because by one side, we are trying all the time using stable scientific categories. By the other side, we know that they are unstable, they are created, and they have a social process of construction in history. That's kind of tension that we have in fact to work in order to construct, for example, policies of quota and this kind of thing, not only at the University of São Paulo, but at the universities in Brazil. And normally that is the point when we see the debates in the juries along the country. Normally when we see the judgment of a jury or of a judge, we see the kind of test of type of skin made by a physician, or we receive also genetic strategies to comprovate, to prove that, oh, I'm a black and I can enter at the university to study, I don't know, medicine or engineering, this kind of thing. So I'm here not to save us of the problem. I'm here just to say that I don't know. I don't know. All the time you are trying to construct good policies and good strategies to deal with this kind of unstable and problems that we are seeing, but also to deal with the problem of racism in Brazil in the university. It's difficult to and that's it. That's the kind of complexity that we are dealing there. Thank you.
Thank you. So thank you, Rogério. We have about 15 minutes for questions. And I think since we are talking about diversity and belonging, we can have questions in Portuguese if this is the case, right? Because we had English as the language of the seminar, but of course, it's open also.
We can translate, obviously. I don't know.
I think it's important just to the foreigner, the two foreigners here to talk about to give the date of the quotas policy at USP. When it started.
Okay.
It finished 50%.
Okay. The debates in Brazil, the most important law in Brazil is starting in, I think, 10 years ago. Now we are celebrating 10 years of the law of quotas in Brazil for all the system. And normally the quotas law says that half of the students from the public system education entered at the university. We are block half of the positions at the university for this public, and within this population of this half of population, we choose the percentage of black people at the society. For example, in 50% of the students at the University of São Paulo, 37% in these 50 are from black and brown people. I think that's the idea. At the University of São Paulo, we introduced this kind of strategy in 2017. It's some years after the first law, the national law. That's it. More questions of this?
It was progressively introduced
in fact, the University of São Paulo refused to use race and or color as category to students at the beginning. The university tried to use social quotas. I mean, people from the public system. That's what they tried along, I don't know, 5-6 years. But at the end of this process, they saw, well, it's impossible to achieve this percentage of the population, the race, the black people, with this strategy. So they changed it, and in 2011 they introduced. Normally I say that we have the 4 doors to enter in the university, because we have the public system here. We have the no racial category and the racial category, and within these categories we have a small percentage of people who is more poor in the society. So people with 1.5 minimum salary in family, we select this kind of part of this population. It's a very complex system that we. That's it.
Well, thank you very much for this presentation. It was very interesting. And I wanted to make a point and also ask your opinion about the Brazilian quotas. I don't know if that's the name in English. Because my boyfriend, he is brown, and he comes from the north part of Brazil, so he has this ancestrality that's indigenous, but he's not indigenous, right?
Mm-hmm.
And last year I was talking to him because he studies computer science and this kind of stuff, and he said he wanted to come to USP, but he couldn't. Not he couldn't, but it was very difficult because he works and studies. It's very difficult. I said, well, applies for a quota because you're wrong. And he said to me that the quotas are not well suited for people that have indigenous background, because the brown people are labeled by the evaluation board by their phenotypic traces that are black and not brown. So if you have an indigenous background, you don't have the exact phenotypics they're looking for. And I looked to it, and it was right. It was a little bit of a surprise to me because I thought it was, well, better developed than it is. So I wanted to ask you what you think about it. I know that my question is very naive, so
No. It's central of the policy. Your question.
That's the problem because a lot of people in Brazil are not black nor white nor Asian or yellow.
Okay. Yes. Indeed.
Yeah, they are from the original people here in Brazil, the indigenous people, and that's a problem. I don't think they get it.
When the policies were developed and the Supreme Court debate this kind of problems, the debate was separated in two branches. One branch for Afro descendants, so the quota was developed for them, and from this perspective, after a long debate, they decided to use the phenotypic trace in order to, as a criteria to enter at the university. So I passed a lot of time discuss with the commission. Listen to me. How do you work with kind of unstable and difficult way of reading people, etc., etc., etc. So it's a work, okay? But for indigenous, from this perspective, so it's phenotypic. So when you, it's the way we read the people and how this is connected with all kind of problems that black people have to face along his life, entering the shopping or entering the thing. I don't know, this kind of racist problems that black people has. Okay, that's it. But for indigenous, they decided to use the ancestor or criteria. That's it, ancestrality as criteria. It's not phenotypical. It's a decision important because the indigenous says that it's true that they were violent along the long history of the Brazil, so that the phenotypical traits were completely lost. So it's important to focus in the identity aspects of the process. So if you are indigenous, if you are connected with a community of indigenous, if you have this kind of thing, you can enter. So when you are trying to apply this kind of thing at the vestibular, at the process of baccalaureate, to speak in terms of France, the student have to choose, I want to enter by this door, or I want to enter by this door. If your boyfriend is that, if your boyfriend wants to enter by indigenous door, he has to have a very strong connection with indigenous community. That's not the case. So he has to enter in another door. But some commissions normally read this door only for African descendants in Brazil. My personal position is it's a crazy solution for the case, because this kind of mix that everybody talked before me here. So it's not useful to speak in these terms, but it's my personal position. Nowadays, it's if you put in the Instagram, for example, parditude, pardo, we have a strong and huge debate nowadays in the Instagram, in a public sphere, talking about this kind of problem. It's not solved. It's not solved. And we have a lot of debates in order to put the policy in better terms. I mean, in order to resume my problem for you.
Ignacio, I think it will be already the last question.
Yeah, I have a comment which links also to one thing which are and probably my colleagues from this institute remember when we started to discuss quotas for the undergraduate studies, the most common argument posed by colleagues were against the idea is that, look, we are biologists, we know that there is no such thing like race, so why are you talking about a quota for black race? So I think it's an interesting twist in this story that began with attempts to define race in scientific terms, then deny it in scientific terms, and then you find colleagues at the beginning of the 21st century saying this. This is recorded. It's a story that you can recover from the reports of meetings of the council, the congregation, and so on. So I would like to remember that, which I think is an interesting twist on how this kind of scientific argument has been used, pro and con from this point. But my question is about this idea about this fact actually that these categories are always being negotiated socially and politically negotiated. I see I don't know how to call it, the bancas de identificação,
Heteroidentification commissions.
Now, on the other side, you see that this was a way found by the black movement, a way around the classification by EACH found by the black movement to make a more flexible categorization. Because, for example, depending on the region of Brazil, the results of this process is different. Because being read as a black person in some regions of Brazil, and other regions, well, it depends on the context. So,
when we see the deliberação do Supremo, how can I say, the deliberation of the Supreme Court on these issues, the Supremo is very clear that, I was talking to João a few minutes ago, that when you see the population, it's very easy to see who is white people and black people. These streams of a kind of the deliberation of Barroso, the minister of the Supremo, he says, the extreme of this kind of scale, it's easy to identify. But we have a gray zone in the middle of this kind of poles that is not easy. They say that in his vote. So in this case, he says that if the commission has doubt about the identity of in the game, in the process, the idea is to accept the auto-identification of the people he's in front of you. So at the end, at the beginning we start with the phenotypics, the problem of phenotypics, but at the end, we have to take in account the self-construction, the social dimension, and this kind of instability, I think, of the classification. It's a way to not to be so far from the genome debates, because we know that we have a lot of mixing questions and dynamics there. So taking account all these complex debates, how can we put in better shape the policy. The suggestion of the Barroso in his vote that all the time I present for the commissions that I'm teaching, it's listen, let be clear. It's easy in some cases, in other cases it's not clear. And how we present as pardo or black in the north, in the south, it's different. And it's different how the way João see that, the way Rogério see that, or Maria Alice. So in order to solve this kind of problem, we have, for one, it's taking account the complexity of the process and don't be so, it's not 0 or 1. It's not, and second, all the time you try to construct good commissions with a very variety of people in order to have very different women, men, people from the staff at the university, administrative staff, students, people from outside of the university, and we try to do that in 5 stages. If here didn't work, second time, third time, in order to reintroduce in the process this kind of a complexity, in order to not to be, it's not 0 or 1, that's it. So to do a good policy, we have to take into account this kind of problem. And that's why I'm trying to present this kind of thing, because the solution is not to refuse or not seeing this kind of instability or problems, or because identity and race and this kind of thing, it's in fact it's unstable categories. It has a social dimension. So let's work with this kind of problem, not trying to separate and, oh, I don't see, let's be, no, it's, for me, that doesn't work. That's it.
So for the sake of time, let us thank once again Rogério.
Thank you, João.